common sense supposed to be common? The struggle is real, my friends. The Kate Daly Show starts now.
Where does the real power lie? The power behind the power. Because it's no longer about who lives in the White House. It's about who owns the White House.
This is the presidency. How much higher can a politician go?
The real power isn't here. It's beyond here. It's above it, but still working in conjunction with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
All right. Hi, welcome, Kate Daly Show. So glad that you're joining us right now. I got a special guest, and you're going to want to hear his story. I'm still having a hard time hearing out of the right side, so I apologize if levels are off or something's going on with the audio. I'm just trying to hear. So something might be screwy in listening to the show, but I promise you I'm trying to get behind it. And I appreciate you tuning in. Of course, President Trump spoke last night. We'll end up talking about that on the show. I do have some interesting research to share with you that actually I did over last weekend. So I do want to share that with you because it's interesting for sure. You know me, I'm always jumping down a lot of rabbit holes. So I really, really appreciate this guest coming on because there's quite the story to tell. And he had such a presence during COVID. And this is, and what the government is doing to him. And you're going to want to know his story and understand it and in some way help, because there are a lot of Americans that are still undergoing a lot of the tactics by the federal government. They can ruin a life in an instant for no reason. And when they come after somebody, I think the first instinct is to say, well, there must be something there. And that's actually not true, as we found. Look at Dr. Kirk Moore's case. I mean, all of these cases, these people that I interview, it's amazing to see what the federal government can do to people and get away with it on our tax dollar, because they win, 98% of their cases. And it is disgusting. It's disgusting legal system that we've got right now that's not getting fixed. And so I welcome to the floor, and I'm very excited to actually have you on the show because I think that this is so important. But Dr. Ron Elfenbein, I really appreciate you coming on. Please tell people, because you were heavily, heavily awarded during COVID, which makes this even more amazing. So please tell people, and do not be humble, I'm begging you, please tell people about your career. I want them to understand who you are.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Kate, and hello, everybody. I'm an emergency room doctor. I trained at Johns Hopkins, and I, became very active during COVID. I really stepped up and took my oath very seriously when COVID hit. So I owned an urgent care center, and we were seeing probably 22 patients a day, something like that, before COVID. And I recognized what was coming down the pike when Wuhan, China was being, literally boarded up and tanks were standing in the streets with the turrets pointed into the city. I knew it was coming to the United States. So I started to prepare as best I could by buying PPE and buying testing supplies, which positioned us to become the de facto testing site for my county in Maryland, and then pretty much the state. Actually, we grew throughout the course of the pandemic. We grew from one site with about 4 employees to over 8 sites with over 300 employees within a year. And it wasn't, it was just because people just kept coming. I mean, we were, our urgent care would open at 8 a.m. and people would start lining up to get tested at 4.
Wow.
And literally we would have lines a mile long down the road outside the urgent care. I'm not exaggerating, over a mile long. We had to hire off-duty police officers to come in and navigate this because it was onto a major highway. So, I mean, there were just so many issues that kept popping up that it was just logistics, like a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
But, we weren't out there advertising. We weren't pulling people in. They just kept coming because the world was shut down and people were dying. And this was a global pandemic. So, we were trying to offer our services as best we could. And because I was able to secure all this PPE before that happened, before the world shut down, I was very generous with it. I was donating it to people. I sent it out to doctors in Connecticut and New York and other states. And actually, the DEA reached out to me, the Drug Enforcement Administration, at one point because they couldn't get PPE. And the special agent in charge of the local DEA office called me and said, "Hey, we need to do a drug bust. Could you please provide us with some PPE?" Which I happily did. I gave it to the federal government. And I mean, we just kept growing and growing. And we became, once monoclonal antibodies, which are basically the cure for COVID, once those became available, I was a very early adopter and proponent of them.
Mhm.
And I started speaking out on Fox News and Newsmax and Sky News and CBS and anyone who would have me. I was pretty much at least once or twice a week on the news, the
Mhm.
TV, talking about how COVID and talking about these wonderful cure, this monoclonal antibody, which is an infusion. It's just a bag of saline, basically, with the drug in it, which is a single antibody, and you infuse it into an IV. And this stuff was working fantastically.
Mhm.
I mean, so much so that people on death's door literally would be turned around within an hour or two of getting this medication. It was, I mean, I've
Did
never seen
this
anything
work?
like it in my entire career.
Did this work the same for, say, flu, pneumonia, those types of things too?
No, no, because it's a single antibody against, in this case, COVID, and it was specific to the variants that we were seeing. So it wouldn't work for any other infection. But to your point,
Mhm.
monoclonal antibodies the technology is not new. So we've been treating other things with that technology for years, 30 or 40 years.
Mhm.
It's nothing new, and it's been around for a long time. Um, so I was talking about how wonderful these things were, and little did I know that because they were so effective, they posed a direct threat to the emergency use authorization for the COVID vaccine. And the Biden administration started to politicize it. They federalized the distribution. So if you wanted to get monoclonal antibodies, all you had to do was log in. The state would give you, if you qualified, the state would give you a PIN number. You'd log in and you'd order however much you wanted. They would send it to you. You'd have it the next day, and you could start infusing people.
Mhm.
But I'm an ER doctor. I don't know anything about setting up an infusion center. I had to learn all this. It was like we were doing it at uh, volunteer fire departments. We rented a couple of volunteer fire departments. There were halls which weren't being used, and we converted them into infusion centers. And it was kind of like writing the playbook as you went, because there was no playbook on how to do this. And we became the largest supplier of monoclonal antibodies in the state of Maryland. We surpassed Johns Hopkins, we surpassed University of Maryland, and we were the largest supplier. And this stuff we were saving lives every single day. I mean, we were infusing over 500 people a week because the stuff was so wonderful and worked so well. And then the Biden administration decided to politicize it. So they federalized the distribution, and overnight that led to shortages. If you remember, Florida
Mhm.
couldn't get monoclonal antibodies, even though they were having a major outbreak. They could not get them because there was this artificial shortage.
Mhm.
So Ron DeSantis, the governor, had to go out and purchase them directly from the manufacturer. Then they started to use equity as a means, as a determinant for where they were going to send the monoclonal antibodies. That has never been done in the history of medicine. We've never talked about supplying medication based on equity before. It's always based on need. But now all of
Mhm.
a sudden, the Biden administration started to interject politics and say, well, we're going to send it where it's most equitable,
Mhm.
which just boggles the mind.
Yeah.
But anyway, I went on Fox News and I went on Newsmax and I said, this is silly. What are we doing here? This doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
And then they shut the whole program down based on very spurious data that they were misreading to begin with. And I went on Fox News and I said they're going to kill people and they don't know what they're doing. And this is the height of bureaucratic arrogance. And 4 months later, completely out of the blue, I find myself indicted on healthcare fraud charges for patients I had never even seen. We had at our 8 sites, we had nurse practitioners and PAs, and they were seeing the patients. I spoke out. I exercised my First Amendment, right? And I was speaking out against the government who was politicizing something that shouldn't be politicized, that was saving people's lives. And they came after me for it. 4 months later, completely out of the blue with no warning. And they accused me of upcoding. These are the patient charts in my
Mhm.
hands right here.
Mhm.
5 counts of upcoding. And again, I didn't even see these patients. And um,
Wow.
the federal judge who adjudicated my case before even the trial said in a pretrial conference, he said, this seems like a case of shoot first and ask questions later, because they hadn't even gotten their hands on these charts before they indicted me. The government didn't get them until after they indicted me. And in order to know what the coding level is, you have to look inside the charts. But they
Right.
couldn't do that because they didn't have the charts.
And that was their main proof. That was their proof, right?
Well, that was their
Made up
right,
proof. Like that's
right,
what the whole
right.
case hinged on, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So they came after me for this. The AMA writes an amicus brief, which is a friend of the court brief, saying that the rules the government's accusing me of breaking, I didn't break, and the AMA is the one who wrote the rules. The American Association of Physicians and Surgeons wrote an amicus brief on my behalf, saying exactly the same thing. So the chief federal judge in Maryland throws the entire case out in this 93-page opinion right here, 93 pages, throws the whole case out and says, after a 3-week trial, and says, there's no evidence. I mean, I can just read you a couple quotes here. He said, the evidence weighs so heavily in favor of the defendant that it would be unjust to enter judgment against him. Quote, the government did not carry its burden and no reasonable jury could have so concluded, end quote. I mean, it goes on and on,
Right.
93 pages of this.
Wow.
And to your question before about awards, so the governor of Maryland personally gave me an award for all the work I did during COVID, a citation, personally handed it to me. The state legislature voted and also gave me a citation. And the State Medical Society named me its person of the year for all the good work that I did during COVID and quote, your bravery. And that they named me its person of the year. And I got that even after I got indicted, which I think says a lot.
Yeah.
So, the typically healthcare fraud is for billing for patients or things that didn't happen, but that's not the case here. All these charts were real patients who really got seen. The government acknowledged they got seen. They got tested. Everything was done appropriately. So really what this is a billing dispute at its worst.
Yeah.
So if you want to, we build what's called a level 4. The government alleged that that was wrong. They never said why it was wrong, and they never said what the right level, quote unquote, should be. But if you want to say fine, so we were upcoding, okay? Of course I wasn't, but if that's the case, the difference between a level 4 and a level 3 on average is about $50, okay? 50 times 5 counts, 5 patients, is $250. The government came after me for 50 years, 50 years in jail, and millions of dollars in restitution, over $250.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So for all the work I did during COVID, all the hundreds of millions of dollars I saved the system by all the hard work that we did and all the people's lives that we saved and all the hospitalizations that we saved, they're coming after me for $250. So as they're packing their bags, literally putting the tape on the boxes, the Biden DOJ, they appeal. And now I'm facing a new trial in August because the trial the process had already started. So the Trump people come in, they have no idea what's going on. The case is just one of thousands of cases they already, have in their queue, and it's sort of just being pushed forward. So,
is there new evidence? How did they get away with doing this again?
No, it's just they appealed. So now there's a new trial. The judge, when he issued this 93-page opinion, said, not only am I acquitting him of all charges, but in case the government appeals, I'm guaranteeing him a new trial. He did both, which is very unusual. And 93 pages, by the way, in a judicial opinion, the Supreme Court very rarely writes 93-page opinions. So, yeah, it's insane.
In your favor.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So Rod Rosenstein, who was the former Deputy Attorney General of the United States and the former Maryland U.S. Attorney, wrote an opinion on the Baltimore Banner. He's not my attorney. I didn't hire him. He doesn't work for me. But he came out and said this case should never have been brought. This should send a strong message to the Biden DOJ that this kind of thing shouldn't happen. You shouldn't be tormenting people like this. So President Trump established the Weaponization Task Force, and this is the memo from Attorney General Bondi, dated February 5th, 2025, where she said she was setting up a weaponization task force. And of these people that they were looking at for weaponization, number 7 is people who are whistleblowers. And I believe I fall squarely into that category. I am trying desperately to get a hold of somebody on the weaponization task force because I spoke my First Amendment right. I said the Biden people are going to kill people because they're shutting this wonderful program down that's saving people's lives. The next thing I know, I'm facing 50 years in jail and millions of dollars in restitution for nonsense. And I'm desperately trying to get in touch with Todd Blanche. It was Pam Bondi, but she just apparently was just let go. So now I'm trying to get in touch with Todd Blanche because we've tried to get in touch with him. There's no website, there's no phone number to call, but I need somebody to get me in touch with the weaponization task force, because clearly this is weaponization of the government. We have the judge, the chief judge of Maryland, saying that. We have former deputy attorney general of the United States and Maryland attorney. We have the governor of Maryland issuing me an award, and another governor of Maryland, former governor of Maryland, writing a letter on my behalf to the DOJ saying Dr. Elfenbein's a good guy. He didn't do anything wrong. This is crazy. And here's a copy of when I went on Fox News and I said they're going to kill people. I mean, like, this is the United States of America. This stuff shouldn't be happening. You should be able to exercise your First Amendment right. And as a physician, I should be able to say, I should be the one to make the decision and with my patient, not the government, whether we're going to be providing this life-saving medicine or not. The Biden DOJ, the Biden administration had no right to do that, and they did. They politicized something that shouldn't have been politicized, and it was really disgusting. And what I said in December of 2021 on Fox News, I would say again today, even though it got me in all this trouble, because I firmly believe what I was saying is true. And they killed people, and people were put in the hospital because of this. It's terrible.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm a whistleblower, and I think I should get in touch with somebody, or somebody should get in touch with me. The president asked them to provide cases. I mean, this is what the memo says.
Right.
Go out and find cases exactly like mine and show it to us. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get somebody's attention to say, hey, this is crazy. It's already been adjudicated. The judge threw the case out. Why are we going through this again?
It's amazing. That is amazing. What do you think they were trying? I mean, why? What do you think, as far as what you said, go back to 2021, what you said that just obviously enraged them enough to go after you after $250 and false charges? What was it about what you said that would have gotten to them?
Well, I think it's two things. I think it's the fact that I embarrassed them, but more importantly, according to Secretary Kennedy, he came out multiple times and has said that there's a little known federal law that when you have a vaccine, if there is another medication that's proven effective against the disease for which that vaccine is designed for, and it has an emergency use authorization, it will lose its emergency use authorization because there are alternative treatments.
So a threat to
which is 100%, which is why they destroyed ivermectin, which is proven to be effective, and hydroxychloroquine. And again, this isn't me. This is Secretary Kennedy saying this. So yes, I embarrassed them. I made them look silly, and I said they're going to kill people, and that's bad. Okay, but beyond that, we were the largest supplier of this drug in the state of Maryland. The U.S. attorney in Maryland was brand new, had just been appointed by Biden, and they had this COVID task force out there that was looking for people to make headlines, and I was the perfect person to fit that. From a political perspective,
Right.
Obviously they destroyed my life and they destroyed my family's life. I have 4 kids. I have a wife who's a doctor. Like, this has been the worst experience I could ever imagine going through. And I mean, I would put like loss of a loved one here. Just below that is this whole, this nightmare that they put you through.
It destroys.
And yes, I was acquitted, but now I'm going to have to go through it again. And it's the process that's the pain and the punishment. It's not necessarily the end result. It's the whole punishment is the process.
Have you noticed that since that directive from President Trump, have they brought forth cases for whistleblowers? Have they been effective in doing that? No,
they have not. And which is why, again, I think they'd be happy to have my case. This would be a win for them. They would look at this and say, oh my God, this is great. Like, we got a guy who's being prosecuted. And exactly. There's a federal judge who wrote this this incredible opinion. And, we're going to save taxpayer dollars. We're going to save time. We're going to save this guy who look, I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but it was a hero during COVID. I was out there. I didn't see my family for 2 years. I was on my phone constantly because I was running 8 sites. And we were infusing people right and left that qualified because it was a life-saving drug. I mean, and at worst, what they came after me for was a minor billing dispute over $250. And you're going to say I should be in jail for 50 years? And this has never happened before, by the way. This has never happened. No one has ever been prosecuted for what they're coming after me for.
Wow. So there's been a clear, since 2020, I've noticed with all the people I've interviewed, that we do like 300 interviews a year. And it seems to me that there was this very clear desire to end the patient-doctor relationship. Like, you don't have a relationship, the government gets to oversee your relationship. Do you agree?
100%. 100%. Yes.
Yeah, like there's an
And
annihilation of it. Yeah.
totally inappropriate and totally
Mhm.
wrong, and it's a total violation of not just the fact that you should be able to talk to your doctor and all the rest of that, but there's a reason for that. I mean, the
Mhm.
doctor is look. There's lots of smart people in government, no question about that. But do you think the government knows best than the doctor that you choose to go see? You're seeking their advice. You want them to tell you what they think and what they think you should do, not some government bureaucrat. But
Right.
that's exactly what happened. They took away people's informed consent when they shut this program down. And they, by the way, then they started to take the EUAs away from the monoclonal antibodies, the emergency use authorizations. And their rationale when they shut the program down in 2021 in December, and I called them out for it on Fox News,
Mhm.
their rationale was, oh, there's an Omicron spike, and the monoclonal antibodies don't work against Omicron, which is dubious to begin with. But then
Mhm.
they said once the prevalence reaches 70%, we're going to shut the whole program down. Now, number one, you don't know that the prevalence is 70% because we were only testing genetic testing on about 1% of people who got COVID swabbed. So
Mhm.
you have no idea what variant the person who presents, if you're presenting to me and I'm seeing you as a
Mhm.
patient, I don't know what you have. So why would the government take that right away from you, from us to talk
Mhm.
about it and to say, hey, Kate, I have this medication I can give you. It might work, it might not, but there's very little to no side effects. So
Right.
why not try it? But
Right.
they took that right away from people, and that is disgusting, and that is wrong. And I will never forgive them for that because lots of people were harmed because of that. There's no question about it.
I noticed that when Operation Warp Speed was announced, that right after that, I think it was right after that, that there was announcement that the government was going to take over basically three different areas, and one of them was going to be airlines. They were going to take a big seat in running the airlines, which probably people wouldn't know that was happening because it's still under the private labels of the airlines themselves. Also, the medical side, hospitals, care would go through lawyers. It would be AI'd at that point, but it would be government directives would then control the overall directives of hospitals. And then the other one I suspect would have been trucking and supply chains.
Mhm.
So in the event of that, and looking at what the government did to rush to judgment to procure this vaccine that I feel like with the evidence that's been shown that it was already being produced, so then they just slapped this label on it. There was a huge, obvious protective where this can be the only thing that works, this can be the only thing, and
Right.
there's a lot of money involved, and so it was a threat to that, I would imagine. So can you describe to people what this did, the medication that you prescribed, what did it do in the body that was so
So
different?
right. So the reason it's so effective is because
Mhm.
just an antibody is your body produces a protein, and it basically binds to the virus and binds it
Mhm.
up so that it can't infect you. What this is it's a single antibody cloned quadrillion times. Okay. So the
Okay.
bag that we're infusing into your arm is the antibodies that your body would produce, say, given 3 weeks. Okay, so if I infected you with COVID today, 3 weeks from now, you would have this great immunity to it. You'd have all these antibodies your body would have produced because your immune system ramps up. But
Mhm.
we're going to give that to you in one quick shot. It doesn't take 3 weeks, it takes 30 minutes. So it's incredibly effective and incredibly safe. But again, the government didn't like it. As you said, they wanted their narrative, which was vaccinate, 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 vaccinate. That was the
Mhm.
only acceptable treatment, quote unquote, and it wasn't a treatment for COVID.
Right.
Um, and I didn't mention this, but the government actually, the Department of Health and Human Services, reached out to me and said, you're pretty good at this monoclonal stuff. Could you open up a site for us at
Really?
FedEx Field where the Washington Redskins play football? And I
Mm.
said, absolutely. So the government paid for everything in partnership with HHS and the Maryland Department of Health. The three of us,
Mhm.
we worked together. We opened up a monoclonal infusion site there. And I had to convince them to test as well because we could take sick people, test them,
Mhm.
and take them right from the positive test, put them in an infusion chair, and cure them same day. And they were like, "Oh my God, that's such a great idea." that became the blueprint for all monoclonal antibody infusion centers going forward. And that was my idea. And, and it was very successful. But like, again, would you go into business with somebody you think is a fraudster? Right?
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. You can't
Yeah,
make this stuff
and then
up.
they turn around and prosecute you.
And then they turn around and prosecute me. Right. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. And,
I know.
I mentioned the 5 charts, right? So there were 5
Mhm.
patients. We saw in that time frame of the indictment, we saw over 100,000 patients. Just to put this into perspective, the
Mhm.
government looked at 5, and they didn't even look at them until after they had indicted me, kind of very Stalin-esque, like show me the man and I'll show you the crime. They looked at 5 charts. They never even had a professional coder look at the charts, just government attorneys. They never even hired a professional coder to go through the charts and say whether the coding was accurate or not. And they never said what was wrong with the coding, and they never said what the appropriate coding should have been.
Wow.
Like this, you sound like you're crazy when you talk about it, but
I know.
this is my reality. And we hired a professional coder. He went through hundreds of charts and said they were all appropriately coded. In fact, a couple of them were possibly down coded by accident. They should have been a level 5, not a level 4. And then we subsequently hired another coder to go through them and look at them. And he said the same thing. And these are people who are professionals. And the first guy was the former president of the American Association of Professional Coders. The second guy, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, hires him to train people to look for fraud.
My gosh.
And again, the American Medical Association wrote an amicus brief on my behalf that said that the rules the government is accusing me of breaking, he didn't break, I didn't break, and they wrote the rules. Like you just cannot, you can't make this stuff up. And they're still coming after me. And again, I think this is a perfect case for the weaponization group, just to find out and say, look, this is crazy. Let's end this guy's torment and let's end wasting taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, for sure. So I know in Kirk Moore's case, all of a sudden certain people stepped in and it was done, right? So that could happen for you if maybe, I don't know what it took for Dr. Moore, because he was kind of looking at this very long sentence for not doing anything wrong. So what do you think could happen? I mean, if you can get a hold of the right people in this case.
Yeah, hopefully the same thing. I actually have become very good friends with Kirk since this happened. I cold called him after I found out he was acquitted, and I said,
Yeah.
hey, yeah, I did. I called him, and he was so gracious and so wonderful, and he's been such a good guy, and he's been so helpful to me. But I was on another podcast a few months ago, and you never know who's listening. And I say that because I'm on this podcast with Mary Talley Bowden, and a couple days later, my phone rings, and the other person at the other end of the line says, "Hi, Doc, it's Senator so-and-so, United States Senator so-and-so. I saw your interview, and I want to help you."
Nice.
And I don't want to give his name, but I mean, you never know who's paying attention. And I was in his office a week or two later with him and his staffers, and we were talking about my case. And I have another secretary of one of the cabinet members. Also, the general counsel called me because they want to help too. So the point is, you never know who's paying attention and who's watching. And if people could go, I have a website. It's www.dropthecase.com.
Nice.
If people could go there, I'd appreciate it. There's all kinds of information. There's a timeline. There's all sorts of stuff. And I have a give, send, go of people, because this has really completely destroyed our finances.
I'm
I
sure.
couldn't work for 2 years, and I mean,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, it's been a nightmare. And luckily, my wife, who's a doctor also, she's a pediatric oncologist. She treats children with cancer. She runs the bone marrow transplant program at an academic center. I don't want to mention the name, but she's a professor there. And luckily, she's continued to work because I couldn't work for 2 years. And I mean, and I still owe my lawyers an ungodly amount of money. And it's still ongoing. They're still coming after me. They just will not let go.
It's amazing. I'm
Yeah,
so
and we
sorry.
just can't figure out why.
What is protection over what they do. So so they don't want anyone contradicting what they want out. So out there for us. So what's your give, send, go? That way people can help.
It's if you just go to dropthecase.com, it's on the give, send, go.
Drop the
Or I have another website. It's www.ronelfenbein.com. My name.
if anyone out there has any contacts with Todd Blanche, I haven't heard great things about him, but if anyone has any contacts there, if anyone listening to this, please share this. And this will be its own podcast. I'll make this into its own podcast on YouTube, X, and Rumble and Facebook, so that people can share just this, so that people can help those that are just so unjustly gone after. And after all these cases and all the people that have, and it goes right back to, if you do not, if you present anything, any idea, anything that goes up against their big agenda, they'll just wipe the floor with you. And it just makes me sick. They're using our tax dollars to do it, which means that they're going to win their cases most of the time, right? So, so it's just thing.
And sorry, I was going to say, there's a guy, Kenneth Polite, who was on my indictment, and he's also the guy that Jim Jordan just named a few weeks ago as having signed off on all the subpoenas for all those congressmen. So, like, it's not just me, right? I mean, he went after congressmen. This can happen to people. Like, people don't think this can happen to you. It absolutely can happen to you. It happened to me. It can happen to the president of the United States. I mean, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on this. Dr. Ron Elfenbein, thank you so much. I'm so glad you joined me for this. I really am. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks so much. Pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate you. It really is a crazy, crazy thing that's going on. And I feel bad for anyone that's undergoing this. Everybody has different thoughts and feelings on what COVID was. I'm one of those that I have a lot of big questions about what it was, and even if it was. So COVID is a very, very interesting conversation to have in this day and time. And then also, anytime you pose a threat, right, to their agenda, and the agenda was, we don't want anyone going up against our vaccine. Right? The vaccine that they already were getting prepared for, that they were already making, so they had enough doses in the time of toilet paper shortages, in the time where we didn't have any shortages in signage, right? The little bubbles that you had to stand on. We didn't have any shortages in vaccine materials. We didn't have any shortage in anything that they wanted to get out there via the government, oddly enough. But we had shortages in everything else. It was such a crazy time, One thing I forgot to ask Dr. Elfenbein was when he was doing 500 a day, was that all very, very sick or very, very healthy, or a mixture, because people were just scared, so they wanted to get the monoclonal antibodies? But I will ask him, I will text him and ask him, but it does come back to money, and it does come back to agenda. Seems like every single time, doesn't it? Money and agenda. And yes, I agree with LB on YouTube. I wish the government had that much interest in election fraud. So, very busy going after people that are a threat to the system, not so much in election fraud that we are incurring right now. So, and still are. Since 2004, again, you're not supposed to say this. They go after shows that say this. Since 2004, elections are gone by the Office of the Internet and put under national security and emergency. So elections are put under emergency, national emergency system, so that no one can know much about what's happening with our elections. And the hanging Chad was the reason for that. The hanging Chad was a lie. It was a bold-faced lie in order to get those elections, in order to have the solution of the software. And then the software now controls elections all the way down to local level, whether you like it or not. So sad, but true. So did anyone watch the remarks last night coming from, about the Trump situation, the Trump speaking? I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. My show is very much get to the truth, and I'm not a party aficionado, and I'm not a party tribal member of any tribe, because I can't be. I've got to look at truth as truth. And that's why yesterday when I said, this stupid King's March by leftists, they always march for the wrong thing. It's like, it's amazing to watch. You know, they march for women's rights, even though we have them, and they march for no kings. We don't have a king. We have a deep state. Very, very different. Very, very different. Back in the day, things were run by kings, but since the evolution of America, we've got this very big deep state that is running the show now completely. And I wish they'd march against the deep state. That would be refreshing to think if anyone was actually getting it right. But they're not. So there's that. What do you do? What do you do when people just get it so wrong? But leftists leftists have a problem with studying anything. I don't mean to be mean, but studying history at all. And they also have a big problem with looking beyond a year. So it's hard for them to assess and look beyond to see what's coming. And it's hard for them to look into the past. They're firmly stuck in the present. And also they'll kind of listen to whatever the mainstream media says, because they do have trust in government. They do feel like government's going to come to their aid. They do feel like government should be more glorious than ever. I don't. And they tend to have those thoughts and feelings. So it kind of filters into what they're about. People on the right that get it wrong are usually very pro-war, no matter what the war is. If we say that we're the good guy and we're going in for the right reason, they believe it. And I'm talking about the extreme right. And also we have a hard time taking the cancel culture out of stuff, because that seems to be kind of the little thing on a stick that keeps us entranced, right? So we tend to be the people that will believe. We just keep on believing that that somebody's going to get into office and do the right thing, and they don't. And we just keep thinking they're going to, or they have our best interest at heart, which they don't. So it's a very interesting thing to see how both sides operate. But Trump, when he did this speech, so that we largely achieved our goals. Not quite sure still why we did this, except for at the direction of Israel. I don't really understand why. Don't get it. Don't get it. So if you guys have any ideas as to why, why this whole thing, I mean, I didn't see any real new information from last night, but interesting. So here, we're just keep on going, and we got a lot of distractions. So I told you I was going to share some things with you that I thought were kind of interesting, and I will do that because I think anytime I'm going down a rabbit hole, I need to kind of tell you about it, because I think it gets a little interesting to kind of tell us what we're going through now. So I was deep down this rabbit hole for reasons I'll tell you later, but I was looking at ALS and MS. I was looking at Friedreich's ataxia. I was looking at Parkinson's disease. These diseases share some similarities, and these diseases are... They go after, obviously you have shaking, you have clumsiness, you have all of these things resulting from this, okay? And I just wanted to point something out to you that I found very, very strange, okay? In a time in the late 1800s, there weren't a lot of cases of this going on at the time. And when I say there weren't a lot, that's an understatement. There were hardly any cases, okay? But this is the strange part that I want to point out to you. All of those diseases that would appear from the 1950s on in the books, all of those diseases were named in the late 1800s. And honestly, within the same tiny little time frame, like MS was named in 1868 by Charcot, Jean Martin Charcot, okay? Or Charcot, however you want to say it. He also identified a year later ALS and named it, okay? So that's the Lou Gehrig's disease, okay? Also, what was named at that time were the ataxias. There's different kinds of ataxia, Friedreich's ataxia, all kinds of different ataxia. Also, Parkinson's was identified by James Parkinson in 1817, but then later named Parkinson's in the same time frame, the late 1800s. Okay. Now, I just wanted you guys to know that when all these diseases were named, they said that there weren't a lot of cases that were identifiable. Okay. But there seemed to be a program that was for neurology, and took place in France, and it was led by Jean-Martin Charcot. Okay, and what's crazy about this is there was a department made and funded for something that wasn't prevalent. Not only was it not prevalent, we don't know if it even existed. Okay. So when they named one of these diseases was named after only studying 9 people. Those 9 people did not have the disease for which they were named after. Okay. But one thing that came out of one of these diseases that was named after 9 people, and they studied no one else, was that it was 3 generations of family members that had this disease. Now, when they named the 9 people, they basically said they had it or they didn't have it. So they were all in the same family. So grandfather, grandmother, kid, right? Grandkid, grandkid. Okay. So they would name the people and then they would say whether they had it or didn't have it. So I started questioning what it was. What did they have? What was it? What was the it? And it turns out, oddly enough, that it wasn't an it. It was like this person had a heart problem. This person had a walking issue. This person had this particular issue. But no one had all of the symptoms that these diseases describe. Okay. In this one particular study, the 9 people were it. And so what came out of that? What was the result? They were literally dying to say that this was hereditary, that it was genetic. And they straight up lied about it. They lied about it in the studies. Don't you find that kind of interesting? Why would you first of all, why would you fund a program that wasn't even being seen in people, but you fund a program to basically find and discover diseases that aren't even prevalent enough to even register at the time? Doctors weren't even registering it, talking about it. People weren't going to them for these symptoms. So they had to limit all their studies to basically hardly anybody. And then I realized that the studies were, in this one particular, were lied about. Like it was straight up a lie because no one had all the symptoms. That means you don't have it. It means that you just have a symptom. A symptom doesn't result in the particular diseases that they were talking about. Don't you find that odd? Now, you start to look at what came from this. Okay, so there weren't any recordable cases from beyond this point at 1868, 1869, 1870. And they didn't start recording those until the 1950s. And they were still very low. Now, what was the reason that they gave for this? Well, the reason was that they were under-recording it. Under-recording it? So, really? Under-recording it. So they just weren't recording it enough. It's the same excuse they give for autism. They go, well, they just didn't report it. Now, I want you to look around right now, and I want you to see anyone over the age of 50 or 60 and tell me how many autism cases are in your family with people that are older. I'll wait. You probably aren't seeing it. You might see a tiny bit of Asperger's, but nothing really. I don't know if they still call it that. They have a new name for it now, but you're not going to see it. And it wasn't that it was under-recorded. It was because if you have symptoms, this kind of disease that we're talking about, think about ALS and how quick it destroys somebody. Think about what happens to a person with these diseases. They're very noticeable. You can't not see them, okay? So you can't not know that somebody has them. So somebody is going to go to the doctor when they have these diseases. They are going to go, okay? So don't you find it strange that it lay dormant until the 1950s? Don't you find it strange that if somebody were to have these symptoms and they had to fund this whole department in France to oversee these for early neurology, don't you feel like people would have been going to this clinic? They would have been seeking out a doctor. They would have been wanting to know why they're suddenly in a wheelchair and can't eat and can't move and can't talk and can't control their bodies. Wouldn't you think that that would happen? So not under-recorded. No, that's a lie. There wasn't the cases, I would imagine, if you're going to just use common sense. Okay. Then in the 1950s, they start coming up, these symptoms. And it just so happens, right, that these symptoms start appearing and people will go back to the original, okay? They'll go, like my uncle died of ALS. They'll go back to the original and they'll say, oh, well, they said in the late 1800s that this was hereditary. Somewhere in the family, you had to have a gene. Somewhere in the family, somebody had this. Now, you could go through your maybe 6 generations of people that you probably heard about or knew about in your immediate family and realize that maybe no one else had this, okay? But they're still trying to cram it down your throat that this is hereditary, that somehow the gene would carry this disease. Now, I thought this was really interesting when I was unraveling this because, I'll go down so many different rabbit holes and I'll try to figure things out because I talked about the fact that in World War II, they were doing a lot of testing on people they wanted to kill, right? Why would you medically test on people you want to kill? Well, pharma was very, very busy at that time. Pharma was very, very busy trying to test out the new program that they would announce to the world for vaccines starting in the mid-50s. But the testing ground started before World War II, but I do feel like it was used there to test out on Jews, to test out what they were going to do, what was working, what wasn't. If you go back into history, you can actually find them admitting this, which is kind of strange, but they did. And I also wanted to tell you that pharma got rocking and rolling right about the time that those diseases that I talked about, MS, ALS, all of those started. Okay, that was about the time that pharma really got their funding. They got their chemicals. They really started it on the labs. There were many labs in Germany. And when I had Dr. Artis on, you realize that we were talking a lot about venom because they had a lot of venomous, poisonous things in the lab while they were doing the vaccines. Okay. So you gotta think about what Dr. Artis was saying. So, okay. So then we're looking at these diseases that were named in that same small time period that aren't backed up by hundreds and hundreds or even thousands and thousands of cases. Strange. You would fund something that isn't being seen. How do you get the money for that in the late 1800s? How do you get doctors to actually invest their time to try to name a disease? But they were very much in a hurry to get this on the books. Why? Why were they in a hurry to get this on the books and say it was hereditary? Well, when you say it's hereditary, I would imagine that a lot of people would then stop looking for a reason. They would stop looking for a cure. They would stop looking for what actually caused it, right? So then, as I'm perusing this and realizing that the original studies were lied about, I haven't looked at all of them, but because they were all coming from the same area, the same department, the same people, some of them eventually worked for the Rockefellers. So when I'm looking at this group of people and I'm thinking, you're naming something that isn't quite there. Why do you need to set a precedent in the late 1800s for these diseases? Does not make sense at all. Okay. Except if you realize that minerals would be taken out of our food supply for the coming industrial age, the chemical fertilizers would start to be processed pretty soon thereafter. They would start being applied because the eugenics track was starting. Okay, so they were claiming population was high. We had to move from natural fertilizer to industrial fertilizer. Okay, so you knew that. So as we look back in history, we can see that this whole new way of getting our food supply was forming. And we also knew that they had a vaccination program, but the vaccination program was very unnecessary in the 1950s. Why? Because the vaccination program truly, really, and if you understand disease, a lot of that's going to come from bad water and fecal matter and things like that. But in America, we didn't have those issues going on truly. I mean, nationwide, we were doing pretty well. Okay. We were progressive. We were actually doing very, very well in this area. And so why the need for vaccines at that point when you didn't have a lot of issues with, drinking out of the river with fecal matter in it or, doing all these types of things. So it's kind of interesting that you would set a precedence for saying something's hereditary and get people to stop looking at the reason why, knowing that these things were coming. Now, when we went from natural fertilizer to industrial fertilizer and the chemicals in industrial fertilizer, and then went into DDT, which basically was a toxic poisoning that caused polio symptoms. That's what polio was DDT poisoning. And then the vaccine was giving. The vaccine, 90 million doses, were then tainted with the monkey kidney disease that they actually admitted to 50 years later, 40 years later. But 90 million doses were infected with this monkey kidney disease, the same monkey kidneys that grew the culture for polio. Okay. So 90 million of those doses went out to Americans. That was about half, right, of the population. Then we started declaring a war on cancer in 1970 because cancer started blowing through the roof. Diseases we'd never seen before. You had ALS, MS, all of these different diseases that attack over time. All of these started coming out, okay, post the vaccination program. Then you had like chronic fatigue. That wasn't a thing until the vaccination program. So you have toxins attacking the body. Crazy, right? So you have all these toxins. We don't do parasite cleanses. And the toxins of all of these things, right? Whatever's in those shots, whatever's in the fertilizer that grows our food, DDT and then glyphosate, they go after copper and all of the minerals in the body, right? So they deplete your minerals. Okay. And then we add stuff to our water. We add fluoride. We add all these horrifying things. God made a pretty good body to withstand most of this, by the way. I give it to his design that has helped us so far, because talk about wanting to annihilate us. Jeez. So they set a precedent in the late 1800s on diseases that weren't really seen yet. They had to actually lie about the studies. Then you have the advent of fertilizer, how our food is grown, industrial chemicals, all introduced. This is clearly after pharma, okay, announced themselves as this new beacon of health, okay? So we're in the 1900s. We start doing a lot of testing. We start developing a vaccine program in a time that clearly we didn't need it. Got pretty good water, got pretty good things going on, health's pretty good. And they try to tell us all of a sudden that polio spikes. Polio spikes. Why did it spike? Why? No one ever asks that. But in Congress, they did. And in Congress, they saw that it could be, because I read through some of the congressional reports at the time in 1952, they said, hey, maybe this is the DDT that we're spraying everywhere. Maybe there's chemicals in that are causing these symptoms. Well, many Congress members believed that, and they said, yeah, this very much could be. So we're going to start lessening the spraying of DDT and see if the symptoms go down. Well, they did. But they had the vaccine on the way. They had to protect their vaccine movement. They had to protect the vaccine program. Just like talking with Dr. Ron Elfenbein. He was talking about they had to protect their COVID vaccine, right? So at this time, they had to protect their new polio vaccine. And then the polio vaccine itself, right? Majority of those doses were then diseased. Okay, they knew that they had been infected with the monkey kidney disease, right? That were cultured. They used those monkey kidneys, right, to culture polio. Well, they knew they were infected, but they sent them out anyway. They sent them out anyway. And they built this huge fear campaign, right? Remember the March of Dimes? Remember all of these things that came out that were pre, polio, and they had big government campaigns for all of these things. So, are we looking at a perfect storm? Could parasites that we don't do cleanses from actually rob you of your minerals along with these fertilizers, along with these toxins? If you're not getting rid of parasites, because I think diseases are caused by three things, right? Parasites, bacteria, you got certain bacterias, parasites, and toxins, right? So if you don't have a good immune system with copper at the helm, okay? Because guess what the loss of copper does? The loss of copper in your body has the same exact symptoms if you don't have copper in your body, right? So has the same exact symptoms of this neurology department was trying to claim was hereditary back in the 1800s. So you have industrial chemicals coming in, which then annihilate people's copper. Copper is kind of taken out of the food system. Copper is the leader of all your minerals, the leader. Then you have a vaccine program that further does damage, okay, to your immune system. And then voila, we got a whole lot of disease. And we have 1 in 2 has cancer now. And they still can't cure it, although they already have, but they won't let you know that. They still can't cure it. We have all these neurological diseases. We have all these things. If you took your minerals and realized the benefits of copper and realized the benefits of all of these things, and we're understanding what these trace minerals did for your body, could those trace minerals help get rid of parasites? Maybe. And can parasites rob you of minerals? Yes. Can toxins rob you of minerals? Yes. So over the last 130 years, we have a lot of things attacking us, but we don't actually have the real reasons for it. So, I've done a lot of shows on copper because copper is so not talked about. In fact, the doctors for the Johns Hopkins medical establishment, since the 1930s, they kicked all the country doctors out and they started saying that you had to be trained a certain way. They aren't trained in minerals. Okay, I think it was like 20 minutes they get on minerals or something like that. It was crazy. They're also told to tell people that copper's toxic. But isn't it interesting that you would start naming diseases for symptoms that would come out much later that would actually be sort of the same symptoms of these types of things? The loss of minerals, okay? And when you see a vaccine program that's basically spinning the COVID shot as the pneumonia shot It's Judy Mikovits. Dr. Judy Mikovits said it was the pneumonia shots, the same as the shingles, the same as COVID, that whatever they want to name it, it's put in a blender and you get to get this vaccine. And people think they're warding off certain things. They're not. You're just doubling down on your immune system. You are, and not in a good way, you're doubling down on destroying it. The eugenics program has been going on since the late 1800s. And it's been very masterful at knowing what's coming. And so when I say we're in spiritual warfare, I truly mean that, because Satan would understand exactly what to pinpoint and what to do to the God-given bodies that we have, the God-given immune system that we do have. So I did find it very fascinating and wanted to share that with you, that these diseases are made to look a certain way and made to look prevalent in times when I don't think they were. I don't think it was underreported. If somebody's in a wheelchair, you're probably going to go to a doctor and tell them about it. You're probably going to go seek help from maybe some of the big universities at the time, or you're going to want help for yourself or your child. You're not just going to stay in your home and have it underreported. That's hogwash. That's ridiculous. That's BS. And so it doesn't make any common sense. But if you kind of know what's being developed and you can steer people into producing these results of this disease and then call it hereditary and call it genetic, I think there's a lot of things that aren't hereditary and genetic. I think that a lot of times this is basically coming from toxins. I'm no doctor. I'm just saying, looking at how the lies develop and are curated, it is pretty interesting to watch the toxin load cause symptoms, okay? And they can name it something else, like they did with polio. They can say DDT poisoning, there is no poisoning, and polio just emerged. Oh, there's no reason. There's no reason for it. It just emerged. It's just there. And no one thought to ask why. Why did it suddenly develop? Why did these symptoms why did we suddenly have chronic fatigue? Epstein-Barr? All of that came after the vaccine program. We need to be able to take this and look at this as a whole. I did some of this as a show once when I was hosting Alex Jones' Fourth Hour. I was doing that for a couple of years, and I talked about this. It's kind of like a history lesson on the poisoning of America. And I've been amazed as I go deeper and look further that we have a problem connecting all of these dots and looking at the information as a whole over the last 150 years. Pharma starts developing, and all of a sudden they're naming diseases that aren't there that would appear later. You got to find some kind of weirdness in that. You also have to understand that when virus was named, right? When virus was named and they talked about the 1918 flu, that the doctors were saying things are not contagious. They're not bacteria, possibly, but there is no such thing as a virus. And you look and you see the people that worked for Rockefeller actually named virus based on a bacteria they were seeing, because they said the virus was invisible. So we're dealing with an invisible thing. And they said, well, it's a bacteria, but we feel like it's a new thing called a virus, and that the virus is contagious. You're setting up what is then in the books as something that actually didn't exist, but they made it exist, and they just told people it was invisible. And people believed it because it was coming from a white coat. So they believed it. And then we had whole departments of virology. If you think that they could develop and curate a whole department over neurology when we're not seeing a lot of neurology problems and issues, okay, symptoms that are deriving from this, you don't think they could also make up a virology department? I think they can, actually. I think they can. I think they would. So you have to start questioning the whole medical cabal. And if I were you, The only fix to this is to understand minerals, understand parasites, understand how to get those cleanses going. I'm actually in a cleanse right now for parasites because there's like 5 or 6 different ones that reside in the gut that have very telling symptoms. You know, now we have a lot of hormonal issues, and a lot of people are wondering why men in their like young men are having like low testosterone and things like that. And there's a lot of chatter about it being parasites. We have parasites that we don't cleanse from, and that's what's causing lower testosterone. It's what's causing some of our hormonal issues, and from everything from skin issues to disease to everything else. There are a couple of parasites that can result in some of the same symptoms of the neurology type diseases like ALS, MS, and those. And so a lot of people think parasites are the cause of MS, because of the fact that the parasite has to live off the host. And this is why you get a slow degeneration of bodily functions and the brain. So because it has to live off of it, so it does it very slowly and you digress slowly. So I would have to agree it makes more sense than we don't know, because that's what they tell people. We don't know. You don't know in 2026 what's causing a disease? You don't know in 2026 how to deal with that disease? Do you know what I find really, really interesting? Is that there's never been a study, and when I say this, I'm just mind blown by this statement, okay? Because it's true. There's never been a study of anybody with ALS, MS, any of the diseases that Parkinson's, where they address it with copper. Don't you think if you were a studying physician and you had to know about the body and health, okay, which ours don't, but let's just say, for kicks and giggles, let's just say, wouldn't you go to minerals first? Because those minerals have a very distinct job in our bodies. Wouldn't you think that the minerals would play a part in maybe having them be low and maybe symptoms developing? Okay. Wouldn't you think? I mean, I would. So isn't it interesting that they don't go there, think about it, talk about it, nothing? Don't you find that surprising? Don't you find it surprising that they never talk about parasites? And if you do, you're some sort of woo-woo like weirdo. We do parasite cleanses for dogs. In other countries, they know to do them. Why don't we do them here? Everything you eat, your fruits and vegetables, your meat, everything. And by the way, don't eat meat with cellular on the label. You're not getting actual meat. But anyway, why? It's a lab-grown meat. Why would you not know that? Why would you not understand this? Why would you not look and see what these things are about? Because when you're eating, when you're drinking, the things in our water system, we're still getting parasites. You don't have to go to a third world country to get a parasite. We have enough things in our food supply here that would cause them. When we also have glyphosate since 1995 being sprayed multiple times. I interviewed Dr. Stephanie Senoff. She was amazing because she said, you know, when they started spraying glyphosate 3 different times during the growing or all through the growing process, instead of just at the end, 1995 was a huge, huge marker for autism going through the roof, and you can see it on the charts. You can see it on the chart. The more we sprayed, the more the more you'd have this perfect storm, maybe aluminum in the body via the vaccines, mixing with the glyphosate, perfect storm, shutting down the things that you see that result in the symptoms of autism. So yeah, I think they can play a perfect storm type part in it. And I think that it's everything the doctors don't talk about. They don't talk about minerals and they don't talk about health. I remember when I got my husband out of the hospital, was supposed COVID, but it wasn't. It was pneumonia. But they wanted to do remdesivir and a ventilator, but I wouldn't let them for good reason. On day 5, he was golfing. And it was those simple high vitamin doses, right? Vitamin D, vitamin C, and we gave him zinc, and we gave him ivermectin, okay? and he was golfing on day 5 out of the ICU. So when this happened, one of the doctors said to me, "It's a Christmas miracle. It's an anomaly. It's a Christmas miracle." You mean good health is a Christmas miracle now? Because it doesn't coincide with the teaching of the white coats, the Johns Hopkins medical cabal, right? So it is now considered an anomaly or a miracle if you survive and you actually take care of your health, or you improve something based on health, or you say, hey, could that be a mineral loss? There you go. Don't you find that amazing? Maybe we should work on our minerals, and maybe we should work on getting rid of parasites. And maybe you wouldn't even have to visit somebody in a white coat to tell you. Okay. Do I believe there's a place for our doctors? I do. I actually do. There are some things, but not in health, more for, what is it, like something happening to you, you're bleeding out or fracture or whatever the case may be. I think there's a great place for them there. But in health, we've really missed the boat in America because we're not really looking at health anymore. We're just looking at pharma as the cure. And if you just become a writer of pharma, oh, here's take this and oh, take that from pharma to cure everything, then you've just become an advocate for pharma. You're not really doctoring, right? So let's go back to minerals. Let's go back and look at, are you taking enough copper? Are you taking enough of these minerals to actually work properly in the body? So the mineral copper makes iron. We have a lot of diseases that actually interrupt the process of iron, and they do it in different ways. Okay. Some of those diseases I mentioned in the beginning, that's what that was about. So if you go back to copper, enough copper in your body, actually producing the right kind of iron for your body, you're probably not going to see those issues. And so if the minerals work together the way they're supposed to and aren't interrupted by parasites and aren't interrupted by, when I say interrupted, that's an understatement, destroyed by pesticides and toxins and all of that, the body would be working very, very well. You know, there's a lot of organizations that conspire, I think, in these last days to really take a hold of our health and make it so that everything is about just getting healthy again. And we need to understand these things because we have to understand what it is that can really actually truly help us too. So I wanted to kind of give you a glimpse into research, because I think all of us should be researching at this level. All of us should go back to the origins. There's so many things I haven't researched yet, and I wish I had all the time in the world to do it. There's a reason that this show, I think by design, was not allowed to grow. And that was because we were doing too many interviews with too many whistleblowers and too many people saying it's this, not that. And when that happens, you get censored very, very heavily. And I've experienced that. When you start talking about health, you get censored. It's very weird. It's very weird. One of the things, sorry, I can't talk, but the YouTube is very, very crazy about censoring because heaven, my gosh, you can't hear anything that might be an answer, right? Because it's heavily controlled, and that is the medical industry. They're very crazy about protecting the medical industry in the way it's trained. And on YouTube, man, you will go into YouTube jail in 2 seconds if you talk about anything that isn't coming from the cabal. So now that government, I think, has overtaken that since 2020, the hospitals, the lawyers, the administrations telling them that they have to do XYZ, or they'll get sued. Okay. So now the hospitals are driven by this cabal and cabal of government and the cabal of the deep state. So I just wanted to kind of give you that breakdown. We need to do a lot more research. I need your help in doing research because I think it's that important. And share this with people you know. Maybe it'll open some eyes to when they say it's hereditary and they say it's genetic, you should think twice about that. Maybe it could be, okay? But I'm gonna guess that we get a lot of stuff from our relatives. But I don't think disease from toxins that shows up after the year 1950 is going to be one of them. Call me crazy, but I don't think that can happen. So I think that we should be looking at all of it. I think we should be trying to understand a little bit more about the origins and look at the studies that they did to put it on paper that certain diseases started existing back when I don't think they did. And you have to ask yourself why. And there's a lot of questions there. Got to ask yourself why they would do that and how they would fund these things. But I'm going to guess that coming out of Paris and Germany, we had a lot of people working on vaccines. We had a lot of people working on pharma that came from that area, and a lot of people that came over to the United States to work for the Rockefellers, a lot of the same individuals in the Rockefeller Medical Institute. So you got to look at all those commonalities, and then there are no coincidences. I'm not a coincidence theorist. So I give you this as food for thought. Could I be wrong? Possibly. I always know that because, hey, it's human. But at the same time, I don't believe in these kinds of coincidences. And when you can't account for something through common sense, maybe you should look deeper and something's wrong. Like maybe you should look into that and say, okay, why would they hide something? What's going on here? And then we can start to look at maybe some of the things that need to happen. Because if they lied, that means that there are possible fixes to these things. Okay, so if you discover a lie, then you can't chalk it up to hereditary. You can't chalk it up to anything like that. Then there has to be a reason. And maybe the reasons I'm giving, maybe that's not true. Maybe that doesn't have anything to do with it, but there is a reason. But I'm going to guess, because I think that we're complex individuals, but it's also very simple, that if your minerals are broken down by the stuff that we get sprayed on us and the stuff that we eat and the stuff that is growing what we eat, then I would say that we need to take another good look at minerals, and we need to take a good look at parasites. And I think there could be perfect storms in all of those things. I see people right now. I did a cancer ebook, okay? And it's all the things that are actually helping. All the things, because there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there too. So a lot of people will say, try this, try that, try this, try that. You don't have time when you get cancer diagnosis. So how do you deal with that without chemo? You don't want to go pharma style because it's so deadly, right? So you're going to kill all the good stuff. So how do you do it? And I'm seeing people get help from this certain institute named in this ebook. And I'm also looking at the things that are actually helping. And it's all health driven. And so you can actually change a situation. You can change a situation. And I'm very careful in the way I say this because of how YouTube is and how some of these things are. But go to katetalks.myshopify.com, get the ebook. It's 14 pages, dialed down, tells you exactly what works, what doesn't, and why. Okay? That to me is what we need to have more of, and that's good information. And that's after 100 interviews with some of the most amazing holistic doctors around the world that I've done on the show for the last 16 years. That was a compilation that came from that, because people were asking me all the time to give them that information when a family member got sick or they themselves, and they said, okay, what do I do? Well, then I started writing it all down and giving it to people, and I'm like, why don't I just put this in an ebook? So go get the ebook, store it on your computer. I have a feeling in the future that you won't be able to get information like that, to tell you the truth. So it's very much worth it. Go get that. Also, why do I drink this Cardio Miracle all the time? Because it is 20 times the fruits and vegetables of any product you're probably taking right now in liquid form. And it also delivers nitric acid, nitric acid to the body. This is so beneficial that I wish I would have been taking this for years. So I sip on it all day. I take 2 doses. When I took 1 dose, it didn't work. When I do 2 doses, I can feel it. So if I ever miss a few days, I feel it. This is amazing. And we need these nutrients more than ever. So cardiomiracle.com/Kate. Go get it. You'll get a little discount. Go get it. There are certain things I think that are worth doing right now to improve your health. And I don't know what else they're going to spray on us. I don't know what else is coming. But the healthier we can be, the better. So if you can get healthy, by all means, I mean, this is what we should be looking at right now, because this is within our control. You actually still have control. Okay. We don't live in a time and place right now where somebody tells you what you can have like in your home and take. I don't trust the FDA. I think the FDA is a cabal. So when somebody goes, is it FDA? This actually is approved. But the thing is we need to ask ourselves more questions about that too. I've done shows on the FDA and it's a money thing. So I would say you look at the things that actually work, the scientists that were honest enough to develop them, the things that get talked about in hushed rooms. I would look at those things. And when you see this cancer ebook that I have, it's really amazing because it goes through the things that actually do work, the products that do work and have been being tested for a long time and people are getting great results from. And it's also good preventative. So just so you know, I so appreciate you guys. Thank you. Yes, fungus and molds, I'm getting like texts and messages. Yes, there are things like that impact our health as well. I didn't mention them, but yes, fungus, molds, things like that. But look, we are dealing with a lot of things because look at the amount of disease. In 2026, we have worse health than we did in 1950. How's that possible? Look at the results. How is it possible? Well, I'll tell you. You start spraying a bunch of junk on people's food and you start a program of shots where your health is somehow in a little vial with a needle. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of lying and scheming that's going on and a lot of money and a lot of control because these little shots you got to have when you go to school, and they made it very prevalent, right, throughout our culture, and also the worship that goes along with it and the media worship. And I'll tell you what, you're going to find a pack of lies is what you're going to find. So in all the research I do and everything that I'm involved in, I will tell you, we have a lot of work to do on the front of our health. So this is why I appreciate you guys so much. And I'm going to play the outro music. I also get to the website, katedalleyradio.com. You can listen to the show live from there at 2:00 Mountain Time, 4:00 Eastern. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Yes, we did change that because Mondays are holiday days, and so we were missing way too many shows that way. But I thank you so much for tuning in and for giving me your ear, because it's hard to relay this information because we have been so indoctrinated and brainwashed. Very, very difficult to give this kind of information out and have people digest it. And I appreciate that you've listened so far, because it's very, very hard to get people to understand and see the last 150 years and to see how brainwashed we are in health. So there you go. Be faithful, be fearless. And I'll see you back here on Tuesday. In fact, Chris Ann Hall is coming on at noon Mountain Time, 2:00 Eastern live. And then I will proceed to do the regular show at the regular time, but she'll be an early interview that day. You can also see it on YouTube later. But Chris Ann Hall is going to be talking about the citizenship, right? That's a big court case. We'll be talking about that too. All right, you guys, thank you so much. And I'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks. katedalleyradio.com for all the links to everything I talked about too.